I had been gone for just over a week, running an exhausting undercover assignment that kept me sleeping in cheap motels and eating gas station sandwiches. By the time I finally drove back into my quiet little neighborhood, all I wanted was peace, a shower, a home-cooked meal, and maybe 10 uninterrupted hours of sleep. But the moment I turned into my driveway, every instinct I'd sharpened in the field screamed that something was wrong. The first thing I saw was the garage door, slightly ajar, its bottom corner bent like someone had forced it open. My stomach dropped when my eyes landed on the heavy-duty lock I'd installed, shattered, lying in two clean, broken pieces on the concrete. I threw the truck in park and bolted to the garage. My gut twisted as I stared at the empty space where my Jeep should have been. The Wrangler wasn't just my ride. That vehicle was department-issued, part of an ongoing federal task force op, fully loaded with encrypted tech, surveillance gear, and case evidence locked in the glove box. Losing it wasn't an inconvenience, it was a potential national security nightmare. For a moment, I stood frozen, hands on my hips, mind racing through a dozen worst-case scenarios. Then, before I could process another thought, I heard it. That voice. Shrill, smug, unmistakable. "Excuse me." I turned, and there she was. Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA. Perfectly coiffed blonde bob, pink polo tucked into khakis, a clipboard clutched in one hand like it was a weapon of authority. She strutted toward me from 3 houses down, her heels clacking on the pavement like she owned the street. "You can't just leave that eyesore here," she said, her tone dripping with superiority. I blinked at her, adrenaline pumping. "Where's my Jeep, Karen?" She tilted her chin in that way only people like her do, the type who think their clipboard grants them omnipotence. "Oh, that thing." She waved a dismissive hand like my Wrangler wasn't a 6-figure tactical asset. "It's being towed. You were warned, repeatedly, about community guidelines. Oversized tires, off-market modifications, unauthorized decals, your vehicle was in clear violation. I've been more than patient, but we can't have the neighborhood looking like a truck rally." I stepped closer, my voice sharp. "That Jeep was locked in my garage. On my private property. You broke in." Karen's smirk deepened, mistaking my simmering rage for submission. "The HOA has the right to enforce compliance when homeowners fail to do so themselves. Your lock was just in the way. Consider this a lesson in following the rules." The board voted unanimously. "You'll need to retrieve your thing from the impound lot and pay the fine if you want it back." Every word she spoke was like gasoline on a fire. She didn't just cut my lock and steal my Jeep, she'd tampered with sensitive federal equipment and compromised an active case. But Karen didn't know that. She thought she'd flexed her HOA authority over some rugged little toy. She didn't know that every piece of tech in that Jeep was traceable, every move recorded, every unauthorized entry logged. I took a breath and turned on my heel without saying another word. Arguing with her would do nothing. Not when the next move I was about to make would make her regret every smug word. Inside, my fingers flew over my secure phone as I dialed a single number from memory. The line clicked, and a deep voice answered. "Task Force Command. This is Agent Cole," I said, my voice low and sharp. "Code Black. Vehicle compromised. Civilian interference. Immediate retrieval authorization." There was a pause. Then, confirmed. "Hold position. ETA 35 minutes. I hung up and walked to my porch, leaning casually against the railing as if nothing had happened, though my heart was pounding with a mix of anger and anticipation. 30 minutes later, the quiet cul-de-sac was transformed into something out of an action movie. First came the black SUVs, their tinted windows reflecting the early evening sun. Then, a convoy of tactical trucks, agents in gear stepping out with practiced precision. Radios crackled as they swept the area. Neighbors peeked through blinds, smartphones pressed to windows, whispers spreading like wildfire. And there, standing in the middle of her perfectly manicured lawn, was Karen, clipboard still in hand, her eyes narrowed in irritation rather than fear. She marched toward the convoy, heels stabbing into the asphalt. "You can't park here," she shrieked, waving her clipboard like a flag. "This is a private community. You need clearance from the HOA too." The lead agent stepped forward, badge flashing. "Ma'am, you need to step aside. Now." Karen faltered but quickly recovered, puffing up her chest. "I don't think so. This neighborhood has standards, and none of you are authorized to be here. If you don't leave, I'll be forced to." "Karen." My voice cut through the chaos like a blade. She turned to glare at me, clearly ready to unleash another tirade, but the words froze in her throat as the agents rolled my Jeep back into my driveway. The tactical matte black paint caught the setting sun, the magnetic covers that concealed the police task force lettering now removed. Gasps rippled through the street. Neighbors stepped onto porches, whispering. Phones tilted, cameras zooming in on the scene they'd never forget. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish as her face drained of color. That's not," she stammered, voice trembling. "It's just a Jeep. Some oversized toy car. I didn't know. The lead agent didn't even look at her. Tampering with federal property is a serious offense. You will remain on the premises until further instructions are given. The reality of the situation finally hit her. Her bravado evaporated as agents documented every inch of the Jeep, confirming the security systems had automatically locked down after unauthorized entry. Her neighbors watched, some recording, some whispering gleefully as the neighborhood tyrant suddenly looked very, very small. I didn't say a word. I just stood on my porch, arms crossed, letting the flashing badges and hushed voices do the talking for me. Karen wanted to flex her authority. She had no idea who she was dealing with, or that she'd just written herself into a federal report that would follow her for years. The neighborhood was frozen in a stunned silence, broken only by the hum of idling engines and the clipped voices of agents issuing commands into their radios. Tactical gear gleamed under the porch lights, the air thick with tension and disbelief. Karen stood there like a statue, her trademark clipboard dangling loosely from her shaking hand, her mouth opening and closing in stunned silence. Every ounce of her usual superiority had drained from her, replaced by sheer panic. One of the agents, a tall man with a stone-cold expression, stepped forward and addressed me. "Agent Cole, the Jeep has been secured. Internal systems confirm full lockdown. No data loss, but the perimeter breach has been logged. We'll need your statement to complete the chain of custody documentation." I nodded, my eyes still fixed on Karen. "Copy that," I replied, my tone calm but sharp enough to cut steel. Her eyes darted nervously between me, the Jeep, and the half-circle of armed agents. This is a misunderstanding," she stammered, her voice cracking. I was just enforcing community guidelines. The HOA regulations clearly state." The lead agent turned to her, his glare cutting through her excuses like a laser. "Man, you cut the lock on secured federal property and had it towed without authorization. That is breaking and entering, theft of government property, and interference with a federal investigation. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you're in?" Karen swallowed hard, her once perfect posture collapsing into a nervous hunch. Her voice was barely a whisper now. I didn't know. I thought it was just a Jeep." A low murmur rippled through the small crowd that had gathered at the edges of their driveways. Neighbors whispered to each other, some holding up phones to record, others grinning with the kind of satisfaction that only comes from watching karma play out in real time. I stepped down from the porch, boots crunching against the gravel as I closed the distance between us. The crowd seemed to collectively hold its breath. "Karen," I said, my voice calm, almost conversational, but laced with steel. "You broke into my garage. You destroyed my property. And you handed over a law enforcement vehicle to a third-party tow company without so much as a second thought. Tell me," I leaned slightly closer, my eyes locked on hers, "did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" Her eyes darted to the Jeep, then to the agents, then back to me. I was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe," she whispered, her voice trembling. "There are rules, and you weren't following them." One of the agents chuckled under his breath, but no one corrected him. The absurdity of her excuse hung in the air like smoke. "Safe," I repeated, my tone colder than the evening air. "That Jeep has done more to keep people safe than you could ever comprehend. And your little power trip nearly compromised a federal case. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Karen's face flushed crimson, her lips trembling as she tried to summon some semblance of her usual bravado. But the weight of the situation had crushed every ounce of her entitlement. The lead agent stepped forward again, a manila folder in his hand. "We'll need her information, Agent Cole," he said. "Standard protocol for the report. Interference of this nature has to be logged and escalated." Karen's knees buckled slightly. Wait, please," she begged, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean to. Please don't arrest me. This will ruin my reputation." "I didn't know." I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't know. You broke into private property, Karen. You called a tow truck. You signed off on a release for a vehicle you didn't own. Ignorance isn't a defense." Behind us, a few neighbors had started recording openly, their phones pointed like spotlights. I could hear snippets of their whispers. "She finally got what she deserved. Karma's real, man. Look at her face. She's not coming back from this one." Karen's breath quickened as she realized the weight of her actions. Her world, her carefully curated image as the queen of the HOA, was collapsing in real time, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The lead agent handed me the folder. "We'll need to bring her in for questioning. It's up to you whether you want to escalate this to formal charges, Agent Cole." I stared at Karen for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until she squirmed under the weight of my gaze. "Consider this your warning," I said finally, my voice steady but lethal. "This is federal property. Next time you so much as look at that Jeep, I won't stop 'em from taking you in." Her head bobbed in a rapid nod, tears glistening in her eyes. Yes, I understand." I'm so sorry. It won't happen again, I swear. I turned away from her without another word, walking back toward my porch as the agents began to pack up their equipment. The Jeep's engine roared to life, the tactical modifications humming quietly as it rolled smoothly back into the garage, the lock already scheduled for replacement with a reinforced security system by morning. As the convoy pulled away, the neighborhood buzzed with hushed chatter. I could feel their eyes on me, the same neighbors who'd once gossiped about my late hours and suspicious vehicles. Now they looked at me with something different, respect, maybe even fear. Karen, on the other hand, stood frozen in the middle of the street, her face pale, her reputation in shambles. The clipboard, once her badge of power, slipped from her hands and hit the pavement with a dull thud. By the time I stepped inside my house and shut the door, the adrenaline had begun to fade, leaving only exhaustion and a simmering anger. I'd file my report, I'd debrief with the team, but one thought lingered as I stared out the window at the quiet cul-de-sac. Karen had just learned the hard way that there are rules even she can't bend, and lines she should never have crossed.